All right, today what I'm going to be doing on the planter is we are wiring in a second electric motor for our liquid kit. We're trying to run 1034 and it's thicker than Alpine and we're just not getting the rates out of it that we want. So I built a little controller box for our electric motor. It's got a light on it so you can see when the electric motor is running. Keeps everything nice and clean and it's tidy. It's got your master switch, bypass switch, fused, relay, and a solenoid in there. We've been running that for a couple years, but there's a few things about how I built and designed this that after running it I realized I need to change, and adding a second motor into this system is just not designed to handle the amperage, so we're going to redesign it and rewire it. I quite enjoy doing electrical and making circuits and building things and making it look professional. So first we're going to create a wiring diagram, and then I'll know everything I need to pick up, and then we will make another one of those boxes. I'm going to put it in a bigger box just so that it's not so cramped and it's easier to fit in there. That one worked, but this one will have to be bigger because it's going to have two motors running off of it. We're going to draw up our diagram on the whiteboard. We have two power sources. Off the tractor, we run our motors, and then we tap into the height switch on the planter so that when you lower the planter, it automatically kicks on the electric motors so that you don't have to be fiddling with an extra switch in the cab. Okay, here I have my primary circuit for the motors designed. One of the flaws in my previous circuit was that the light bulb was before the fuses. So if the fuses burnt out, the light would stay on and you would still think you're running liquid through. So we've got a main fuse here. It'll be a 50 amp fuse before our solenoid, and then that'll light up the master light that shows the circuit is on. And then from there, we're going to split and we'll have two more fuses, and then after those fuses we have a light for each motor so you can tell if one motor drops out. This is kind of what I've come up with. We have our primary circuit that just powers the pumps through solenoid. And then we have our planter, which has a height switch. So to power up the solenoid, you have to close the height switch and the master switch, and that'll power up the relay, which will power up the solenoid. Or if you're in the yard and you want to calibrate your fertilizer, you can use the bypass switch instead of the height switch in conjunction with the master switch, and then you'll also be able to power up your relay, which then will run your pumps and you can calibrate in the yard without having to lower your planter to engage the height switch. Here you can see our pump. We're going to put them side by side, and we'll just tee out and then we'll tee them back together over on this side. And this is our pressure adjusting valve, but we always run it max flow because we can never get the right gallons out of it anyways. Okay, I redesigned it a little bit. I wanted to have two relays in there just kind of as a safety, so if one relay went down we could just change it over and still keep going. And then I don't have power going to the planter from this bypass switch, which I know it would work either way, but I like this way a bit better. So we'll get this built now in a little box and we'll put it on the planter. This time we'll also size the wires correctly to what we're trying to run, because in that other box I might have put a few too small wires in there and things got a little hot. Here is my old box that my old one was in, and this is the panel, the controller, and this is what we're going to make the new one in. Give me a bit more room, won't be as crowded, and I can add a few things in there to make my life a bit easier. This is everything I'm going to need. This is a junction block I'll have in on this side so that I can make all my connections there for powers and ground. And then I got my two relays, my LEDs, my fuses, and then I'm going to reuse this solenoid, and we will figure out how to mount it all in here cleanly. I got this plate cut out. This will be the platform. It'll go right here, and I will bolt all of my parts onto it. So now let's lay them out, mark it so I can start drilling holes. Alright, I think I got it mocked up how I want it. I'll have my relays there, solenoid there, 3 fuses here, and my switches there and there. And then I'll have 3 lights on the edge of this box, one for your master power, shows you when the system's powered up, and then I'll have 2 lights, one for each pump, to show you when they're running, and if a fuse burns out, that pump or that light will also shut off. I've got my board that I'm gonna bolt everything to pretty much finished. I'm gonna give it a quick coat of paint, but before I do that, I need to make just a quick hold down for these fuses here. Well, I'm pretty confident in my bracket, so I'm gonna get it painted up now. Just gonna use some C&H gray that I found upstairs in the parts department. And then we'll start working on the box and getting that modified to how I need while the paint dries. I'm impatient, so I'm just gonna speed up the drying process a bit. Now I'm gonna start working on the box. So I got these tabs or bolts welded in that'll hold that bracket. And now I need to get some nuts welded on or bolts welded on for this, my junction box, which will sit there. And then I need to drill 3 3/4-inch holes for my LEDs to go in the side. I got the holes drilled in it for my lights. Now we need to get a main wire hole drilled in on the bottom, and that's where the harness will feed in and out. I got my little panel painted, and I'm gonna start putting it together, getting everything mounted how I want to mount it, and then I can figure out how to run my wires and make all the connections I need to make. The last thing I have to put on is the solenoid. It'll mount right there, but I'm gonna quickly get some of my wiring figured up because the hole for the wiring is behind the solenoid. So once I put it on, I don't want to have to take it off. And then the rest of this stuff I can wire behind the panel because all the wires go through like that. Heat shrink is the best way to make sure your connections stay clean and non-corroded. There we go. I got the solenoid all wired up. That'll be my energize, and then that's power going in and out to the pumps. And now I got to connect the relays up and finish off some of the wiring behind the scenes. But now we'll get the label maker out and do some labeling. That looks nice. Doesn't look so fun when you flip it over though. I'm getting a bit more of the wiring done. So now it's main power into the solenoid, and then I got my 2 separate pump feeds coming out of the solenoid, going to their own fuses here. And then we'll join these. This is going to the pumps now. And those tie into the pumps as well as some of the LED lights. So I need to get the lights installed and get the wiring going for that as well. I like the lights because they're a good visual representation that the pumps are running. I really wanted the orange light to light up as soon as the master switch is on so that you know the system is active, whether or not the pumps are going or not. And that will not work this way. So I'm going to get rid of the light here, and then we will get power from here. We'll add the light in, which has a terrible drawing. And then we'll jump over there and we'll tie it into the ground here So the light always has power, and the master switch, it's a ground controlled switch because I prefer switching on the ground anyways. Once you flip that switch on, the light will light up as long as that fuse isn't burnt out. I think that's how we're going to go. And then we get rid of that here. As we get farther into wiring this thing, I need to make some more connections and grounds and stuff. So we will add our junction block in here. And then we can, start running some of our grounds and powers to some of these studs and make it a bit easier. It's a bit of a painstaking task, but I'm getting there. I'm making some connections, and I'm having to label as I go because, well, there's beginning to be a lot of wires. So I think it's coming together pretty well. All right, I have finished making all of my ends and connections, and so now I can kind of get the box put together, but I need to mount it on the planter first, and then I have to run my power and my power going out to the pumps, because that'll come in here and then it'll also tie in on this. All right, there we go. We got the box mounted. You can see my lights there, and then you just climb up here, open it up, and you can hit your switch, whatever you need to do. I'm working on building my harness now. Whenever I build a wiring harness, I always use Tech Flex or braided wire, like braided shielding, instead of that split loom plastic shit. Because this stuff, it's just so much nicer, better quality, better protection, and the plastic stuff just degrades. I'm getting everything mounted up in the box. I connected my LEDs to my connection back there, and now I'm just finished running all my wires. So these top two studs are power coming in. This goes to the height switch on the planter, which is on that wheel there, and it's the one that when you set the planter down, it tells the monitor in the cab to start planting. So I got that tied in here. So that kicks on my main solenoid, or my main relay, turns on the solenoid, and it'll turn on my pumps there. And then these two wires are for my first and second pump, and then this is ground before the main switch and ground after the switch. So this switch just breaks the ground, and then I ground to the box, which grounds to the frame, and I've got my wiring harness run to the tractor as well. And then here on the back of the box, you can see how I've got my wires coming out. When I build stuff, I love making it look professional, so I always try to go above and beyond. I think that looks quite good. I've got my main harness, which is right there, and it'll run along the frame, and then I will make a 7-pin connector up there at the hitch so that you can just plug it into the tractor, and then that connector will plug in your air pump, which is right there, and it'll plug in the fertilizer pumps. I've got everything run on the planter that I need to, and now I need to hook the whole system up to power. I'm gonna mount the plug on here, and I want it to look nice and factory, so I'll figure out a way to do that. I'm currently just building a template to mount this on the front of the planter. I kind of sketched it up on this piece of cardboard. I'll transfer it onto that piece of metal and then weld that onto this bracket. There we go, that's not too bad. I wish it was perfectly symmetrical, but I'm not a machine, so it'll have to do. A nice fresh coat of paint, and on the planter it goes. Wow, I think that's gonna look good. The paint just needs to get a bit dirty so that it looks normal, but I like how that sits there, and then it keeps it clean because there's a 7-way on this and a 7-way on this, but if I added a second one of these on this tractor, that would be confusing. I finished wiring in everything on the planter. Here's all my connections to the plug. I gotta figure out something to just cover this back end up. This is for the pump, and then the rest goes to the controller. Now I am finishing up the tractor side, so that's my main tractor harness. I'll run it underneath the cab, under the engine, and then there's a few terminals I can connect it to there. And then the air pump, we get power on a fuse source in the cab. We got all the shields off because we're gonna get an inspection done, which is awesome. So now I'm just running this under the cab and up to the front. There's a junction block right here for the positive, and I'm gonna hook it up right there, which is really nice because there's a mega fuse on this as well. So if this cable, you know, gets a hole chafed into it or wears through and it shorts out, at least it'll pop that fuse instead of just shorting out the batteries or something. Come on, that looks factory. Here we go. Over here at the box, you got your main power. Now the system is armed, and then you can either lower it and it'll kick on automatically, or you flip your bypass. Now you can see both pumps are running and they're each fused, so if one goes out, you can tell which one it is. Now I just need to add my pumps, and that'll be on the next video.